Who are we here with?
We're here with Dustin. Hi, that's me. I finally did well enough in one of these events to make the deck profile.
Really?
Really?
What deck are you playing?
It's playing Artmage Power Patron.
What does it do?
It does a lot. We were playing this for Primal format, which is a tournament that we kind of made up. We beat it to death a little bit. I've said that before. Say it again a couple more times until it's in the public conscious. But it's the idea is we're trying to lower the summon count per turn, so that the limited number of actions makes it so that you can't just extend infinitely past like your opponent's interruptions or anything like that. The idea is you have to stop at some point or another, so that you don't run into the problem of which you'll run into sometimes in bad formats in advanced. Right now it's really good, but sometimes in advanced format you'll run into a bad format where it's you'll just watch your opponent combo you into the wall for like 10 minutes and then you just pack it up and you lose them. They're super unsatisfying. So we're trying that out. I like the lore decks that they do, so I thought I'd pick this deck up and give it a shot and see how well it would do inside of this format, and it turns out it actually does very well. We'll go ahead and jump into the list. Obviously we want to play 3 Medius. He's the main starter of the deck. Every combo goes off of him. He is kind of a big choke point depending on what your hand looks like, but he can summon any of the power patrons out of your deck, which can include the Artmage power patron or any of the other ones depending on what build you want to play, or it can also summon the pendulums out of the deck too, so you get a lot of utility. He's great in the grind game too because he can just summon himself right out of the grave again, and you can just reset your plays and just go right back into stuff. So main starter, gotta play it. Super searchable. 3 Owl. This is a 50 card list, so I'm playing more copies of cards than you would see in other lists, and that's mainly for if I run across that Grasslick Screener deck. In this format, that Grasslick Screener is at 3, but the idea being there that you can fill up your whole grave, but if your actions per turn are limited, that you wouldn't really be able to put up like the craziest kind of board. You have to stop after 6 special summons. So we're testing that concept. But I am playing a 50 card list. It's extremely consistent. There's a bunch of branching ways that cards search each other in this deck. And so for the grind game, and just to ensure that I always have it, 3 Owls. Played 3 Graph Flare. It's the best one to get you into certain combo lines. It's your best extender. It can set the field spell out of your deck. It can set Vandalism out of your deck to search Medius, which is super good. On field, it's a spell trap destruction, and then if you control 3 types that are all different from each other, then that turns into a quick effect, which can be useful, especially since we found that in this format, spells and traps are a lot more important since the number of monster interactions that you can put on the board is relatively limited. 1 Finmill. She comes up as a decent end board piece, and she's recyclable. She does get you the random draw on summon, but a random draw is just not as good as setting a card from your deck in order to guarantee that you can play through your combo lines. So she'll usually be the last one that you end up searching. Her effect is really, really broken, in my opinion. The idea that you just like put Forbidden Droplet on legs and just made it into a recyclable, searchable, spammable card, draws you a card every time you summon it, is kind of insane. 1 copy of Littera, super important for the combo lines, especially if you don't open on enough of these spells and traps to discard and get the rest of your Artmages out of deck. Usually this would be the first one I search. This ends up being the second one, just to get a previously discarded spell that got me into the Graph Flare back out of the deck so that I can discard it again after I've summoned the Littera to get into Finmill, and she's an excellent end board piece that gives the deck a lot of layered interactions on your end board. It's fairly difficult to play through. That's all for the Artmage cards. Honorary Artmage card, because this is always treated as an Artmage card, which is super important because since it is actually treated as an Artmage card and it's a level 10, with non-finito, you can actually discard this if you end up with it in your hand and you have no other use for it. You can discard that as part of the cheat way to get the non-finito out, which is something that I learned a couple days ago. It just didn't occur to me that it was an Artmage. Sometimes I'm kind of dumb, but it's pretty cool. Some other uses for this card that make it kind of insane. So like if you have this on field and you use its effect to blow itself up and drop the Nerva on field, when it hits the extra deck, it'll trigger, and then you can just chain the Nerva to that to change its effect to destroy all cards your opponent controls. So it becomes a 1 card board wipe, which is actually extremely crazy. And then its Pendulum Scale effect is actually pretty nuts too. It's copies 2, 3, and 4 of Called by the Grave. If your opponent activates a card or effect in response to the activation of your Power Patron monster, you can just blow this up out of the scale to negate that card that they activated in response to your card. So having this in your hand early will help ensure that your more significant plays with Power Patron cards end up resolving, which in my opinion is it's kind of crazy. Like, these cards, I think they're very underrated, and you'll notice there's not a lot of non-engine in this deck because a lot of the engine in this deck feels like non-engine. It does the things that non-engine does, and so I'm testing in a lower power format like this, A, the power of these cards, and then B, to see how necessary it actually is to play non-engine cards to succeed. And then we play 3 of these. I'm maxing out on all of the pendulum ones because they all have good effects. This one just searches your entire deck, because if it goes to the extra deck face up, you grab the terminal or terminus, which searches your Medius, and that's full combo, so this gets you into full combo. This one's effect in the scale is still really good, draw 2, discard 1, so you're still moving through your deck, so it acts like a consistency piece. And then I did want to maximize on the pendulum aspect of the deck, because in this format, each time you special summon, it counts the number of times you special summon. And so if you summon simultaneously, that only hits the summon counter 1 time, and therefore I want to max out on the number of pendulum cards so that if my main plays Artmages get stopped, then I can have scales in hand, set up 2 link arrows, and then pendulum summon, which only counts for 1 summon, and then make plays off of those. And they're all just great cards in general anyway. Going second, this card's stupid too. This is what I mean by it acting as non-engine, because going second, this card is just a non-targeting pop that also just searches your entire deck. These cards are ridiculous. This one adds your stuff back, so in the grind game, it's very, very hard to run out of resources between cards like this, etc. So they're all crazy. 3 copies of Shade the Obscure. It's a level 4 Dark Fairy, which means it's searchable off of Terminus, as well as the Medius. It's a decent extender if you have to play through some interruptions. You can get this on board and then use it to go into some link monsters that we'll look at. But then it also helps just move your pendulum monsters to where you want them to be, getting them face up in your extra deck or adding them to your hand. And then it puts itself, it can blow itself up, sets up the rest of your pendulum plays, and then it's face up in your extra deck, and you can pendulum summon it back and go into your link plays. And it is a scale 11, whereas all 3 of these are scale 1s, so it helps to actually get your pendulum scale set up. 1 Vidolium, I don't think you need any more than 1, just because it is highly searchable. It's the higher end of your scale, and then you can use its own effect to keep recurring it out of the extra deck or graveyard, as long as you get the other power patrons on board. That hasn't come up yet, but usually just having the 1 per game. What you're using it for most of the time is its scale effect to blow itself up, and then summoning one of your level 10s out of grave, and then you can make plays off of that. And then when it hits the extra deck, it searches more power patron cards, because why not? Every time any of these cards, anytime you breathe, they search cards. It's really, really crazy. I think, and then the unique aspect that they add in this format, because your summons are limited, and what's cool about these is that they're monsters that you can play in the deck, and since they're modal, because they're pendulums, you can decide to play these as spell cards most of the time, so they actually really don't rack up your summon counters at all. Like, really the only times that you end up actually summoning these are when your Artmage plays fail, in which case then you just go into power patron plays, and you've got a lot of wiggle room to play through interruptions.
Do you think Futureless will run a multiplying Karibo, since they have a 300, 200 skill line?
We can only hope. Unironically, there is maybe some potential to explore there, because some of the Karibo cards actually do summon a lot of bodies all at once. So that's unironically like maybe something that's worth looking at, because some of the power patron cards do search this stat line, and so it is kind of funny because they do have some incidental synergy with Karibos, but it could be a thing. We'll move to spells. 3 copies of the field spell. You just want to see it. Non-once per turn searching is ridiculous, and then it's always worth it to keep in mind as well. In this format, because it only dings your special summons, this gives you an additional normal summon of a card named Medius per turn. So you can burn your normal summon on, you could even like summon an owl in advance of your normal summon. So if you use your normal summon per turn on your owl, you get the field spell, and then you use your additional normal summon to summon a Medius next to the owl. What that actually gives you the ability to do is if you activate the Medius, now you're free to summon one of the pendulums, out of your deck, and if your opponent's only form of interacting with your Medius is a targeting negation, then you can chain the Owl to fuse them off the field and dodge a targeting interruption. So in this format in particular, it's extremely well positioned to handle the summon counter and play through your opponent's interruption, especially if it's targeting interruption. One copy of Assault. I don't think you need any more than this, just because now with Non-Finito being in the extra deck, you can really grab this card whenever you want to, and you only need it the one time, because if you see your Medius and your Medius resolves, then you get full combo, and then from there, I mean, you should be winning the game, which is a crazy thing to say, because I took third. Next, we've got the alterations. This can place your field spell directly from the deck. So that helps you play around Ash, get your play set up, and then if you already control the field spell, it can add a different Artmage from your deck to your hand, including the Pendulum, the Nervado Pendulum, because it is always treated as an Artmage card. That's always worth remembering. Sometimes I forget that, and it does cost me a game, like today.
So four terraforming?
Yep. Infinite copies of Terraforming, and then all of your spells and traps are accessible from your extra deck through Non-Finito. And so technically it's non-finite, it's infinite, the number of ways that you can get to your plays. Even though it's a 50-card list, I never bricked on it, and that's what happens when you put Searchers in your extra deck for your entire deck. And then it does have an engrave effect where it can banish itself if your opponent attacks an Artmage monster. And you can negate the attack, but like that rarely ever comes up, because by then, either you or they should be dead. 3 Prohibited Power Patron Portal Terminus. This card's insane. At the cost of not really being able to attack outside of with your Power Patron monsters in the turn, which it doesn't matter going first and barely matters going second because of the boards that you can set up in this deck. You can dump a Power Patron monster from your face-up extra deck or your deck into the graveyard, and dumping, so you dump this guy in this version of the deck, and then if you get your Litera, you can actually add it back to your hand through the grave by looping it through this card. Sets up all those kinds of plays. It dumps the Power Patron and adds a Dark Fairy from your deck to your hand, and a lot of your most important cards, Medius, your Shade, which sets up all your Pendulum plays, and the high end of the scale are all Dark Fairy, so you have plenty of search targets to search off this card. Makes it extremely versatile. You can get to a lot of your stuff. It also has an engrave effect where if a Power Patron monster battles, even though they're weak, you just banish it from the grave, and that opponent's monster gets deleted, so it's pretty good. One copy of Pedigree. Pedigree, it's one of, because it's only really good going second. It's if your opponent controls more monsters than you, you can special summon an Artmage from your deck on the field. It wasn't really good before the introduction of the Nervado Pendulum, but as I mentioned earlier, if your opponent has a full board and you open this, you can summon the Nervado Pendulum, and then you just use its effect, destroy itself, summon the fusion, and then its effect activates in the extra deck, and then the fusion changes its effect into destroy all cards your opponent controls. So this becomes a 1-card board wipe. And then its other utility is that if it's discarded for the cost of the field spell to search an Artmage monster, it can add one of the traps back from your grave or banishment, which is crazy. 3 copies of Succession, just because it's an additional way to fuse monsters, and I always want to have the option, especially on a quick play, to be able to fuse at a moment's notice. Again, dodge certain kinds of interaction, like targeting interaction, and then have one in the back row usually as part of a layered interruption end board. But then it's worth playing a handful of copies because it gives you more spells and traps in the deck overall to even out consistency, to get your combos set up, search out your Artmage monsters, and then you can also banish these from the grave to take your Artmage monsters, 3 of them, from your grave and put them back in the deck, which can help you in your grind game. So you can play minimal numbers of certain Artmage monsters and not really have to feel bad about it, because then you can just put them back into the deck and then search them again. So it's really good synergy with that card. 3 copies of Theorealized Liberation. I think it's the best one. What I use this for primarily is if my Medius gets negated or stopped, if I get ashed on the summon, and I have this in hand, as long as I control the Medius, I can just summon a Power Patron out of the deck. And so I just go into the Owl and I do the combo, and it's almost like I never got interrupted in the first place. 1 Call by the Grave, because it's called by the grave. 3 Pendulum Treasure, because every single one of the Pendulum monsters gets an effect when it's added to the extra deck face up. So this can be full combo, use this to put Junoldo, the Doom Z one, face up in your extra deck, and then it searches Terminus, which searches Medius, and you got full combo again. Or it can recycle or do a whole ton of other things. Card's insane. One pot of greed. This is our big experiment. It's been in the deck profiles so far. We don't know if it's long for the format, but the idea behind it, making it playable, was it's an experiment to see how much weight an additional rule set of limiting summons in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh can bear in terms of consistency. And so with it just being a one of randomly draw 2 cards, the idea was, okay, how many cards, how consistent can a deck be, and does it really matter at the end of the day if you can only take so many actions per turn? But unfortunately, it drawing into non-engine might be too strong, and so maybe this is the last time, the last ban this cycle that we see good old Pot of Greed included in any of these lists. We'll move on to the traps. 3 Turmoil. You don't play this card to set it, you play this card to discard it. It helps keep your hand stocked up when you need to discard a ton of spells and traps to search for all your Artmage monsters to set up your combo. So any of your Artmage spells that you activate, if you activate the alteration in order to get your field spell set up, or if you already open on it, anything that you have to discard, if you discard this for the field spell, it adds back a spell from Grave or Banish, so it just keeps your resources rotating in the hand. And then if you have Pedigree plus this, they can recycle each other. And so basically you get infinite discards and you can search your whole deck and do the things you want to do. It can be cute during your opponent's turn if they're a heavily graveyard reliant deck. There is the occasional Tier Limits player who wanders through these formats, and you can like chain it to the activation of one of their tier monsters. It'll special summon it from their field, from their grave to your field, and so you can interrupt plays like that. But mostly it's just used to maintain your resources. Discard through the field spell and make sure you get everything set up. And then 1 copy of Recapture. Because of Pedigree, you can recycle it back, so you're never at a loss for it. Counter trap that can be activated the turn it's set is insane, and it's a counter trap that just negates and destroys a monster. Easily searchable and settable through the rest of the deck, so just an auto include at 1 to strengthen the position of your end board. We'll move into the extra deck. Link summons don't count in this format, so generally just including a few link monsters as basically like panic buttons in case the rest of your plays get interrupted is pretty useful. You can be like all the way at 6 specials, and then if something goes wrong, your field gets negated or something weird happens, you can just fold those monsters into a live interruption. And so these are the 2 most generic, so you just run those. Beyond the Pendulum has specific synergy with the Power Patron cards. It just helps you go through and set up your and extend your Power Patrons, helps you set up for the actual arrows to summon into that. Exceed the Pendulum, which can summon the Pendulum monsters back out of grave during either player's turns, help you extend, set up some of the plays that your Pendulum monsters can set up. Pretty useful in this deck. Trying out 1 Quartet in Bloom. I've seen other people play it. Hasn't really come up a whole lot, although it is sometimes useful for condensing down the size of my board if it gets too big. But the purpose of it is that it can special summon 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types, or opposite of that. And since it summons them at the same time, it only hits your summon counter for 1 summon, which is additional utility that you get out of this card that you don't get in other formats, which is kind of cool. Those monsters can't be used for the summon of an extra deck monster until the next turn after you summon them back off of this. But the cool thing about this deck is that the monsters that you're summoning back are generally their own boss monsters. You don't need them to use them as materials to go into anything else. If you summon back a Finmill, you just summon back a Droplet, so that's kind of insane. So those are links. 1 Synchro, because you can just cheat this out with the Pendulum monster, and it can come out and negate your opponent's entire field. And then it helps set up your Vidolium, potentially, if you ever get that long into a game, which can happen because the turns are shorter, the boards are less powerful, and so there is the opportunity in this format to go to higher turn counts than you might go in other formats. So it's there. Maybe you could use it to get into Vidolium, but it might be cuttable. We'll see. Exceeds monsters. You've got Jupiter, just because, it's the other name that you need. And then sometimes the most useful aspect of these is that it allows the Pendulum monsters, when they're stuck on the field, to blow themselves up, and then they go to the extra deck and trigger their effects. And so just having these, like, they're okay, but unless you're playing them, like, with the Doom Z or with the Elf Note Core alongside the Power Patron cards, you're not going to get the most utility out of them that you could get in those decks. But what they do here is just having them in the extra deck enables you to turn any of the Pendulum Power Patron monsters that end up on your field into their extra deck effects, which are usually enough to get you there. So ultimately, they kind of become consistency pieces, although they can come up in niche scenarios. So other Xyz monsters, Varudris, because you can make it. You can pen summon out 2 10s and then overlay to that. And it is an Omni Negate that non-targeting destroys something every time it breathes. So good card is good. 1 Typhon, just in case you get stopped, or you're like just about to break through a board and can't quite make it, you just roll into that. Zeus, because then the Jupiter can actually be something useful. Genora is kind of good by itself, but this card is absolutely worthless unless you're playing it with Doomsies, and so it allows it to turn into something that's actually threatening. So, that was Zeus. 2 non-finitos, 1 to start, 1 for your grind game. Card's excellent. Searching your deck through your extra deck is a crazy thing. Card's nuts, and it sets from deck, so you don't have to worry about being Ash, and it plays around that. And then it's also a fusion summon during your opponent's turn, so you can use it for, again, more layered interruption, and then playing during your opponent's turn after you've already hit the summon cap on your turn is extremely important. So double finito, felt great. 1 Diactorus, he's the Omni Negator of the deck. Generally you don't need more than 1, and you can recycle it back with succession. So you don't, anytime you've gone through it, like if your opponent's outed it, odds are you might be dead, depends on the situation, although when it's destroyed, it can float another Medius out of the deck, which can then summon another Owl out of the deck, or another Power Patron card, and so even if they do destroy it, you still get 2 bodies on the board, and then this is a quick effect fuse, so you're never really totally out of options. Maybe there is some consideration for switching this just so you have a second Diactorus to replace it with, if they out this Diactorus and these are the only 2 monsters you have on board. But it didn't come up today, so play it how it is for now. 1 Guardian Chimera, just a useful target to go into off of your successions and your non-finitos, because those are the 2 that can summon outside of Artmage monsters. And I mean, non-targeting blowing up cards, drawing cards for the follow-up, and increasing the consistency of the deck through drawing cards. This card does everything a fusion deck wants to do. I'll never play a fusion deck if I can't play this card. The card's insane. And then the 1 Nerva, on the field, it cannot be destroyed if you control, or if any player controls a field spell. It's convenient that your deck revolves around a field spell. And then anytime a Power Patron monster activates its effect, you can just change that effect to blow up your opponent's board. Very, very impressive card in this format. Board wipes matter a lot, and then just having a 3300 undestroyable every time I activate an Artmage monster, I'm just going to blow up your board is pretty crazy. So that card's nuts. And then I can walk you through a sample turn of what this deck looks like in this format. And just run it through like a 1-card combo, and you can see how efficient it actually ends up being. So if you have just your Medius, as long as you have 1 other spell that is card, just say as this, you can go Medius, summon the Owl from deck, and that's your first special summon. Activate the Owl effect, and you fuse those off into a Diactorus, which will trigger the Owl. The Owl will search a spell trap from your deck, and so you can grab your field spell, and then you can activate your field spell. Field spell will discard whatever spell trap you have floating around your hand. That's not really doing anything for you. And then you can get into your Litera. Litera can special summon it back. This is maybe a poor example. Let's say you had the let's say we had Alteration start an Artmage spell trap. So we've discarded this. We can add it back, discard it, and then that allows you to get into your Graph Layer. Your Graph Layer can then set some back runner, like you can set a succession in your back row and have that ready to go, or you could set your counter trap and have that ready to go. A couple options there. Even if you start on the Graph Layer, it can also set your field spell directly out of your deck, so you can gain access to that. But you can see, like, it's very summon efficient, but because the main threat for this deck is it's kind of similar to Kashtira in a way, because each of the monsters that you summon represents real interruptions. So even if you just ended on something like this, you have a quick effect spell trap pop, you have an Omni Negate on the field, and then the Litera can bounce itself back to your hand during your opponent's turn, and you could summon the Power Patron, and then the Power Patron can fuse during your opponent's turn. So you could like fuse these off and go into a something like a non-finito during your opponent's turn, and then the non-finito can set the counter trap, which can be activated the same turn it's set, so then you could flip that, and then you'd have 2 ways between these 2 cards of fusing your 2 bodies on board after you've used all the interruptions, and the Litera, which has bounced itself back into your hand, making it a self-sustaining resource loop for your Guardian Chimera. So then you could use either of these 2 cards. If you use this one, it sets up recycling for your grind game, and then you could drop something like a Guardian Chimera. So you do, out of minimal summons, minimal card investment, you do get a lot of layered interruption, and that's like really opening on 1 Medius and 1 Artmage spell or trap gives you that. And that's why, in addition to like all of the pendulum monsters just being extremely useful out of the pendulum skills and not really requiring you to special summon anything, this deck it seems pretty well positioned in this format. It can be kind of complicated to play in the moment. So either the deck's complicated or I'm kind of stupid, but didn't quite take the first place, but I think I can do it next time. Deck seems extremely well positioned in the format. Looking forward to running it back again. But that's the list. That's what the deck does. Pretty extensive deck profile. Hopefully I explained that well enough to where it makes sense, especially with this being like an alternate format. It's experimental. Yeah, this deck seems like it can do some heavy duty damage. So that's the list.